What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to yet another episode of the Tflip Show. Thank you guys so much for watching, tuning in. I appreciate you guys. Without you guys watching and following and subscribing and sharing with friends, as I always ask you guys to, can't do it without you guys. So today we have a really awesome guest. Super excited about it. It's an old friend of mine I've known for a long time. None other than Mr. Rob Moore. Rob, how you doing, man?
Very good. Thank you for having me, Tyler.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining me. So Rob and I have known each other for quite some time, as far back as I think middle school, all the way to Union, right? And through high school, and it's all good stuff. And Rob is on to some incredible things, folks, as an early preview to this conversation. He's on to some really cool things. And I guess to get right to the point, Rob, you're running for Los Gatos Town Council, right?
Yes, I am, yeah.
And as a young guy, too, with 23, right? Are you 23?
Yeah, 24 now.
24?
Yeah,
Hey,
It helps a little bit. Yeah,
there you go. Okay, but still, that's an awesome thing that you're doing. So before we get to that, let's get a little bit of a background. So from where did you get interest into, I guess we'll say, politics and getting involved with your community and stuff like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I grew up in Los Gatos, and so I went back and forth on whether I'd end up there, but obviously I have now. But growing up, I kind of always was involved in some sort of service and wanted to do something that contributed. So for a long time, and you know this, I was really interested in serving in the military, and so I thought that would kind of be the path I took of service and public service. And then spent like 2 weeks over at a camp in West Point and decided, oh no, that's way too hard. I can't do that. So I was always kind of civically minded and did an internship with a local assembly member and just started spending some time in those circles and really kind of fell in love with politics because I think of its ability to make change. So I've done a lot of work in kind of that field, then spent a lot of time working with nonprofits and spent time working on the Hill in DC and working for large like international nonprofits, the United Nations Foundation, all these kind of things that sound cool on a resume, but kind of figured out after spending all this time kind of, supposedly helping all these people far away in all these countries that really need it. The places where I found that I could make the biggest impact were like right in my backyard. And so doing community organizing, start in San Luis Obispo where I went to college, working on ballot measures, all these really like hyper local things that you kind of like. I feel like growing up, I wouldn't think that the guy who's like wants to be on the town council is the cool guy, but I don't know. I spent like a long time working for these big groups, and I didn't feel the same impact that I feel like I'm making now. So that's kind of what drew me to local politics, is that I feel like I can really have a tangible effect on the people that I care about.
It's evidently clear the passion that you have for it, and I think that's what's crucial. You're talking about comparing at the bigger scale versus the local scale, and nonetheless the passion is there. So that's incredible. I want to talk a little bit about what do you want to do? Okay, right? You're running, right? So first, let's ask this: is what's next for right now? For you're running for Los Gatos Town Council. What goes into that? Getting your name out there and people discover you.
Right. So I declared my candidacy in April. The end of April, and so I've been running for the last few months, and now this is where the race kind of really heats up or whatever. So the next like 4 months pretty much consist of me every night knocking on doors, and so knocking on doors and talking to people in the community. It's there's a lot of different ways to campaign. During the pandemic 2 years ago, people running for town council didn't knock on doors because people didn't want to open the door because they didn't think it was safe, and candidates didn't want to expose themselves. But I think we are in a place now where if people are comfortable opening the door, I'm comfortable talking to them. And so door knocking is like the number one most effective way, I think, to get out the vote. And it's also, I think, the best way to get out there and meet your community. There's this woman, and I use this anecdote all the time to figure out her name, but there's this woman who ran for the Sacramento City Council that said, if you want to fall in love with your community, run for office. Because you just get to meet so many people and like understand the variety of opinions and all of these things. And what I've found knocking on doors so far is people care about like it's not about all these things at the national level. Like people really care about their community and what's going on there. And so they care about their kids. So they want a speed bump, right? Because people are driving too fast down their street, or they want their kid to be able to move back to Los Gatos in 5 or 10 years. And so they want some more affordable housing there. And so it's been really good. And so knocking on doors, but also fundraising, which is like not a lot of fun, but it's going well so far. I have had a ton of really generous friends and family and new friends donate to the campaign, so that's that's really cool. A lot of just like kind of logistical things on the back end with the campaign of just kind of figuring out there's running for office is actually like, I think, in a whole different discussion, way too hard. There's like a ton of steps, and you can like get fined at every step along the way. Yeah, it's really
why would you get fined for? I mean, what could you do to get that?
Yeah, so somebody gave you $20 and you missed like the last letter of their last name or something. Like you have to get everything like all the way right. And it's really easy to this being my first time being young and just and I have a great team who's helping me with this, but there's a lot of like easy mistakes, really honest mistakes that you can get in a ton of trouble for, which is kind of too bad. I get it, but it's hard as the candidate.
That's odd. They make it what sounds like so difficult for what appears to be no reason. I mean, as simple as miswriting a name. I mean,
right? Yeah, and I think there's a lot of these barriers to entering into this sort of life. If you look at like the town council right now, a bunch of really great people, and you can look at the city of Santa Clara or the city of San Jose, but a lot of these people are older and independently wealthy. For the town of Los Gatos, you get paid about $3,000 a year to serve on the town council. So it's not a job, really.
No.
It's the $3,000. I'll take it, but it's a little insulting almost. But so a lot of these people to be able to do this, they are either retired or work half time, or have some sort of means that like a 24-year-old doesn't have, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a 35-year-old a lot of the time doesn't have the capacity to just quit your job or whatever. And so there's these kind of barriers to entry that I think are, difficult. And so I've actually been doing a lot of thinking about what my job, I work, 40 hours a week, 40 plus hours a week. And so thinking about how that's going to work for me as I continue on in this. But what I've been talking about with Kylie, my partner, and she's also my campaign manager, and I have a campaign treasurer and a small campaign team. And the thing we talk about is we're just going to work harder. We're just going to work harder than everybody else because that's all we can do. And then I think we'll win. So
you have Kylie as part of your team. It
Mhm,
sounds like.
mhm. Yeah.
What role does she play for you?
So she's my campaign manager, which is
okay.
which is very very generous. I think her being my girlfriend is a harder role for her. But she's an excellent campaign manager, and she is really smart at this stuff. And then I have a friend named Jeff who's doing my campaign treasurer, and so he's kind of doing the financial side. I have a great team of like 5 or 6 interns, and we're getting more interns. I think we got a new one today, which is super fun. So those folks are helping out with kind of a lot of those like logistical things that they can help out with, and then also knocking doors and coming with me to events and all those sorts of things. So it's really good. And then also just a ton of people in the community I have somebody that's helping me with the website, helping me with flyers, all these different people that kind of just lend their skills and things, which is like so generous. Yeah.
You keep mentioning door knocking, and what I think of, especially in today's society, you hear all the time people can easily mistake for you and what you're doing for solicitors.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
How do you get them to say, "Wait, hang on, don't shut the door on me"? Right? Do you have any of that? Not interested? What do you do? What's your opening line?
Yeah. So I usually say, "Hi, my name's Rob, and I'm your neighbor." And that usually helps, and it is interesting. So I'm knocking doors around like closer to my house right now. As I get to the other side of town, I'll see if people think that is as disingenuous or not. But I really don't think it is. I think being a part of the town of Los Gatos, there's only 30,000 people that live in the town, so I think we're all neighbors in a sense. But I think the other thing that I say to people is what are you concerned about in your community? Like, what are you concerned about in town? Why in your neighborhood, are there any issues that are going on that like someone like me who wants to be making decisions on these things needs to know about? And people generally want to talk about what they think is important. And that's really helpful to me. And I think it just leads to like good, genuine conversations about what's important. And so like today I was door knocking right before this, and somebody that was like casing the neighborhood, and I was like, that's awful. And so the woman didn't know about like the 311 number, so the non-emergency number. And I was like, the next time you see that person, call 311 and there will be a police officer out there. And she was like, wow, that's really good to know. And so that's what it's all about. It's just like helping people and hopefully making somebody's life better.
Yeah. What do you want to, actually, let me ask this first, is what separates a town council member for like a city council member? Because the town of Los Gatos, like you said, is far smaller compared if you did the whole city of San Jose, which is monstrous in comparison. What differentiates and what separates those two as far as what you would do?
Yeah, good question. So they're structured differently. So the city of San Jose has 10 city council members and a mayor. And so the city council is broken up into 10 districts. And so there is one city council member who represents about 100,000 people in the city of San Jose, which is pretty crazy. That one person represents so many people. That city council member has a staff of about 5. They're paid about $100,000 a year, so it becomes their full-time job, obviously, and they have a lot of resources at their disposal. And so that's, I think, a big difference between the town, where we have about 30,000 people. There's 5 town council members. Each town council member represents the whole town at large, and we're not paid. We have no staff, so there's no any work that you want to get done, any policies or community events or anything like that. It's all you. And so that is a difference. It's maybe a little bit more of a labor of love in that, but I also think there's a little bit less room for some of the, corruption and those sorts of things. There's a mayoral race happening in San Jose right now. So running to be the mayor of San Jose is actually pretty comparable to running in terms of this in the structure of the city. You can't run to be the mayor of Los Gatos. The mayor of Los Gatos gets appointed from the sitting town council members. And so in the mayoral race, there are millions of dollars being spent. They've already spent over $2 million in that race. Whereas in the town of Los Gatos, I've raised about $20,000, which is a lot of money, but different.
Right.
So it's actually very, very different.
Vastly.
But it's mostly about just the geographic regions that each represents.
I see.
Yeah.
What do you want to do? Let's say you get appointed to your spot. What changes do you want to see first, and are your priorities?
Yeah, good question. So my priorities are making our streets safer, promoting our small businesses, protecting our precious nature in Los Gatos, and building affordable housing. And so those are kind of the big 4 for me. And yeah, I can dive into each of those a little bit more, or whatever. Yeah.
Get to it. Let's hear it.
So I think when talking about safer streets, I mean, that means a number of things to me. So I think, like, my street, people speed all the time, and it's just crazy, like, that people are, driving so fast. And so that's one piece of it. Another piece of that is, like, public safety. And so that person that's talking about, not feeling safe in their neighborhood, everybody should feel safe in their neighborhood. That is so sad that somebody goes tonight and they're like, oh my God, is somebody going to break in tonight? Kind of a third piece of that I care a lot about, and my logo has a bike in it, is transportation. And so really prioritizing public transportation and biking, and making it so people can walk and bike where they want to go, because I think that is just super, super important. You go to cities in other countries, and people don't have cars. People walk and bike and take the train and all of those sorts of things. And we don't really even have that option in most places around here. And I think that's just disappointing. You work at Great Bear, and when I get up early enough, I walk over to Great Bear, and it's like, I'm sorry, not a Great Bear.
I was like, Great Bear,
Boulevard. Yeah. I'm sorry to diss Boulevard like that. No.
Man.
You work at Boulevard, and it is just the nicest thing in the world to be able to just walk over and get my cup of coffee. So much better than having to drive to Great Bear, right?
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
But truly, I just think that's, like, a thing that is so important in a town, is to be able to move around without having to get in the car. And so that's something that's super important to me. Small businesses are also super, super important. I think that small businesses provide, especially in a small town like Los Gatos, provide so much to the community. I live across the street from this Vietnamese restaurant, and the people that own the Vietnamese restaurant live 3 doors down from me. And it's just, like, the coolest thing that they get to live their dream in their community. Like, it's just so different than, like, a McDonald's, right? And a McDonald's is not giving back to, like, the all of the things in the community, the there's the bird store in Los Gatos that's like a couple blocks from Boulevard, and they were one of the sponsors of the Kyle J. Taylor Foundation. They gave that bird the butterfly house that I want, and you know the Amazons and the big, they're not doing that, right? And so I think that small businesses are just super important. They're also a big part of like why Los Gatos' downtown is so I think lively and interesting, and why people want to go there. And so that's big too. Third piece is nature and the environment. And so Los Gatos, I think, has a part of what makes Los Gatos special is that there is a lot of nature and kind of natural beauty and all of those things. And I think that's super important to preserve. I think in general, we've done a good job of doing that. But there is always work to be done. And I think there's a lot of places in town where there's a lot of great, lovely parks and things, but then there's places in town where it's really hard to find a park near you that you can walk to and bring your kids to. And so I think those are important. The last and probably most controversial is building affordable housing.
Very.
And so, yes. And so affordable housing means a couple of different things to me, and I think to a lot of people who kind of work in this space. There is deed restricted affordable housing, which is affordable housing that basically is always going to be affordable in that it is below market rate. And so you can have affordable housing that is 75% of market rate. You can have affordable housing that's 50% of market rate, and the government kind of regulates that,
right.
and will help sponsor that sometimes. There's also affordable housing with a lowercase a that's just housing that is affordable. And so that's the kind of housing that like I live in. So I live in a fourplex, and so while my housing is not restricted by any government regulations or anything, it is affordable for a normal person. And so it's not the single family homes that, you know, are $2 million, $3 million in Los Gatos that someone like me just can't afford.
Right.
And so having those varieties of housing types, I think, is super important. I think it's great to have single family homes. I think like I would love to move into a single family home one day. I'm sure most people would.
Yeah, right.
But I can't do that right now. I just haven't made enough money. My dad didn't give me a bunch of money, you know, and so.
So is it a part of your mission to make that more plausible? Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, exactly. So there's different types of housing that you can build, and so supporting things like fourplexes, which are actually really hard to build in a lot of towns like Los Gatos. The government just doesn't want those things getting built. They want single family homes.
Right.
And I think also not being afraid of things like they call them. Some people call them missing middle. Some people call them like mixed use, where you have retail on the bottom and housing on the top, like Santana Row, but not nearly as nice because then it's not affordable. But yeah, not being afraid to build those sorts of things that the community really needs. And I think an interesting nuance of that issue is that every city in the state of California is being mandated by the state of California to build a certain number of housing units. So Los Gatos in the next 8 years has to build 2,000 housing units, which is a lot of housing.
Do you know why? Because I've heard that.
Yeah.
So I've only heard it like through, you know, headlines or just, I guess we'll say for lack of a better word, rumors, which sounds silly. Do you know why? Because that sounds absurd. Not just cities like Los Gatos. I mean, I think, for example, it's over there on Lark, Los Gatos. They just put a huge condos.
It's called the North 40. Yep.
It's a bizarre amount of homes, and I'm just thinking about, okay, the infrastructure there. The road's not big enough. I'm thinking about the traffic's already congested as is, and so I assume that's one of those things that they're mandated to do with, what did you say, 2,000 homes?
Yep. And so there's only been several hundred homes built in that complex. So 2,000 is a huge number. So why that is so the state every 8 years, each city has to do something called its housing element. It's part of a city's general plan, and the general plan is basically the constitution of the city. And so that gets rewritten every so often. And part of that general plan, the constitution, is this thing called a housing element, and it basically tells you how you're going to build housing, and where you're going to build it, the amount, and all of it. The state every 8 years puts a number for every city. So 8 years ago, Los Gatos had to build 600 housing units. I don't know what the numbers are for San Jose, but I'm sure they're gargantuan. They're
Yeah,
a,
probably compared to
a
that.
lot bigger. I know like Mountain View has like over 10,000 housing units that they're being to our 2,000 units, which is crazy. But the reason for that is because that historically communities like Los Gatos, Mountain View, most of Silicon Valley has not been building enough housing to keep up with population growth. And so there's a ton of people living here. There's a ton of people living here. There's over a million people living in the city of San Jose, but there's not the housing for them. And that's just an issue. It makes the housing really, really expensive and unaffordable for like normal people. And it's also just an imbalance, right? So like for better or worse, people want to live here.
Yeah.
And we have not seen people stop moving here. And so it's just kind of the reality of the situation. One thing that I think is good about all of these new neighbors is the more people that move to a place, the like the denser it can become in certain areas. And so along somewhere like Lark in Los Gatos, where there's a ton of traffic and it's just kind of a mess. Hopefully, with all of that new traffic and new growth, that creates opportunities for us to bring bus routes to there. That creates opportunities for building better bike lanes. And then it also creates opportunities for building the types of housing where people don't need to take their car. So I live right across the street from a Trader Joe's. I never drive to the grocery store. Never, because I don't ever need to. And then there's a Nob Hill, another 500 or 1,000 feet away. And so when you build housing near the amenities that people need, you actually statistically you decrease housing. I'm sorry, you decrease traffic.
Right.
Which is really good. And so then you're hopefully siphoning people to highways and the main streets and getting them out of neighborhood streets where like the traffic is really especially problematic. And keeping things moving a little better.
So here's something I'm thinking while we're still talking about the housing stuff is
Yeah.
that by the time this episode uploads, the previous episode I had with Vito, he's a broker, realtor, all this stuff, right? So we were talking about just we're in a very interesting time with the market right now.
Very
right?
much so.
I mean, especially us being
Crazy.
younger, it's the first that you and I have seen like this. That being said, I feel like Los Gatos included these mandated housing that are pushed upon city by city, town by town. It's going to put us in a position, I feel like, where we might be in trouble, where there are too many homes and people not able to buy. I mean, unless I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like that could get us into a little bit of trouble, no?
No, I think that's the right question. I think that's a super good question, and I think it's definitely a concern. The perspective that I take on this is right now we know there's not enough housing in our communities like Los Gatos. We know that there are the people who work in retail cannot live in the town. And that creates traffic too, right? So everybody that works in Los Gatos, most people that work in Los Gatos don't live in Los Gatos, and so there's a ton of people having to drive in, take up parking places, all of that kind of stuff. And so we know there's not enough housing there for the people that want to live there. And so right now we are at an imbalance. And so what I would like to see communities like Los Gatos do is try to build right now because we know we need it to hopefully get the state off our backs a little bit so they don't come in the next 8 years and say, hey, now it's 5,000,
Yeah.
and because that is a real, I think that's a real concern for people is because if we don't build these units, the state actually has the authority. If we really dragged our feet and said, hey, we're just not going to build any of this housing, the state can just come in and build it for us. And they would just build it. They'd say, okay, we'll throw all 2,000 in a 10-story apartment building. And I think that's like the worst case scenario for everyone, right?
Yeah,
Like
I'd agree.
that is so anti, why anyone moves to these places, to communities like ours. So I think that building housing that matches with the community, but also creates affordability is the best thing that we can do for our community. And I think also allows normal people, again, to be able to move to a town like Los Gatos because, I don't know, I know a ton of us that went to Lee and all of that. grew up in Los Gatos, and not a whole lot of people have been able to move back, and
Right.
that makes the community less interesting, and again, doesn't create the opportunities to have workers in the community. Yeah.
Well, it's just interesting. So hang on, I want to ask: is that what you mentioned it? And I apologize if I missed it, but you keep talking about affordability, affordability. What's going to make that affordable though? Because that's the thing is, I don't see a change, and then with the recession imminent, it's like what's going to make that any better? To just be blunt.
Yeah, no, good question. So the number one cause of housing inaffordability is lack of housing. There's just not enough houses for the people that want to live there. So you see, like, I'm sure you've seen stuff like this in the news of people finding their dream house, and then there's 100 offers on it, right?
Mhm.
And 10 of those offers are all cash above asking price.
Right.
And so the reason that people are doing that is because they see that house as their only option for the house, right? And so they're saying, okay, I'm a rich Apple tech entrepreneur and I can afford it. So I'm just going to say, F it. I'm going to throw down as much money as I can because I want the house, right? If it's your dream house, you're going to spend, probably more than you should. So there's literally just not enough housing. And so the more housing we build, the more people are able to move into houses that are better for their needs. So like those houses on Lark, some of those houses are like $1.5 million,
Right.
which is crazy.
Yeah.
Like those houses aren't worth $1.5 million.
Well, and to
Like,
be clear, they're condos. They're
no, you're right.
multi-story
They're not
condos,
houses.
right?
They're condos.
Not houses, right?
They are condos. Yeah, they're 3-story condos, and they're nice.
They
Don't
look
get
nice.
me wrong.
Right.
Yeah, they're nice, but I don't think they're $1.5 million nice. But so what is driving up those prices is lack of housing stock. There's also issues with people, coming into Los Gatos and tearing down houses that at one time were affordable. So like small cottages, sorts of things that people are maybe paying $1 million for today. They tear down and build a McMansion on it, and then that house is never affordable. It'll never be affordable to a normal person again. And so there's a lot of things happening with housing that are just kind of putting us in this direction of building a small number of really big houses, because that's what makes money for housing developers. That's another part of it. And so nothing against housing developers. It's houses have to get built, but what makes the most sense for them economically is to build big single family houses, because they can just sell that house the second it's built and ready to go. They sell that house, they make their $3-4 million, and they're done. When you build a apartment building or housing complex or fourplex, you're maybe renting it out, you're selling some of the units, but you can't sell all of them right away. So it's less appealing to developers some of the time. So we have to incentivize that and make that make sense for developers, because ultimately cities, like the city of San Jose doesn't build any housing. Developers do. And so the city's just creating an environment to build the types of housing that it wants to see.
So that all makes sense. I really appreciate that. That clears up a lot of things. But then with that being said, is like, okay, because it's an oversaturated buyer's market, undersaturated housing market. With that being said, the demand's high, the supply's low, price goes up on the homes. So to match that, then up the amount of supplies, the demand goes down, right?
That's the idea.
Okay. With that being said, though, is then, okay, so many people say, many people hate living in crowded cities, crowded towns. So then again, I feel like you're in the same, like, almost like vicious circle right now, where damn if you do, damn if you don't, I don't want to sound like a negative Nancy here, but I mean, it's like, is there a right answer here?
Yeah, no, it is super challenging, and I think you're right that a lot of people, I think that's how a lot of folks see it. I actually really think that like dense housing because dense is a word that draws a lot of. I think people think of like the housing projects in Chicago, right?
Yeah,
Is
no,
what
that's what I
you think
picture.
of dense housing. When I'm talking about dense housing, it's very relative, right? And so it's like a fourplex, and so you have 4 units where instead of one family living, so the lot I live on is about 10,000 square feet. That's a normal sized quarter-acre lot that a lot of like single family homes are on. It's exactly that, except there's 4 of us living. And there's 4 parking places, so parking isn't an issue, and I just think there's a lot of appeal to that. And it's also, I also think there's just a level of reality that is, you know, as young people and people that make less money in general, you're just not everyone's going to be able to move into a single family home right away.
Yeah.
And so if you want to live in the community and you want a variety of people to live in a community, you need housing types that are maybe less appealing to some people, but like my home is I have 2 bedrooms, I have a big garden in the backyard, I've got my slack line in the front yard. You know, the neighbor is a baseball coach at one of the local high schools, and he's got his young daughter, and so it allows like young families and normal people to live in a community that if it was just single family homes, they couldn't. And I think too, you wouldn't. I don't think that most people would actually want a community that's just single family homes because it just wouldn't be interesting. And then you also don't have the people that are going to watch your dog, right? And all those things I've talked about with traffic and all that. So
it's, you know, it's interesting actually hearing 2 different perspectives, right? Because as I said, this previous episode, I sat down with Vito again, who is a realtor.
Yeah.
And one of the questions I asked him was the how. I
Yeah.
said, how? Said for someone like myself who wants to live in Barrie, where I'm born and raised, I said, how's it possible to get to that, you know, 1.5, 1 3/4, 2 million and more
crazy
home that to me I would think is a modest home, right?
Yeah.
Question is how, right? And it's interesting hearing your perspective and his, because you bring the community perspective on it, and he brought just, I guess, the blunt money factor.
Sure.
And
which is important. Yeah.
Which is very important, right? But it relates to what you're saying. He came down to the fact of, and you're talking about these 4plexes, right? And everyone thinks about, single family home, da-da-da. Is that it's a stepping stone. He goes, if you want to make it possible, he goes, you buy a duplex and you live in one unit, rent out the other.
Yep, exactly.
And from there, you get to 4plex. Great. Okay, you buy the 4plex, live in one unit, rent out the other. It's a stepping stone process, and then it relates to what you're saying about the community side of things, right? Yeah. Is that then you get involved with community. If you're owning that 4plex, you're involved with your neighbors, you know? So it totally all resonates, and comes together. If you're someone who wants to make that happen, because then there's the flip side of it, who people are always just saying, saying, hey, see you later, California, I'm out of here, right?
Totally. And if that's, what people want to do, rock on, power to them, you know, like, yeah.
Yeah, totally. So I want to ask you, I guess, a hard question, maybe
Please.
not. It's, politically, we're in a very crazy time.
Very much so.
I say it laughing because that's an understatement. I don't think there's words, but I talked about the economy and then politically, where I feel like in our political history, and maybe it's, just because I'm living it, but I've never felt so divided by red and blue.
Yeah, I think it's unique. Yeah.
It's very unique, and it's a shame, but it's not. We could dive into that, which would be a rabbit hole and a half.
Yeah.
But why I'm bringing it up to you is that being a guy who's running for town council, and you're supposed to be the middleman, from my understanding, right? You want to please everyone. You want to please the town.
Consensus.
Exactly. What do you do in a town that, is, let's assume, divided politically between Democrat or Republican or whatever party you so choose?
Yeah.
How do you find a middle ground and bring people together? Because, again, with this day and age, people say, if you're red, I don't like you, or you're blue, I don't like you. How do you bring that together?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's not easy.
It's far from it.
yeah, it's definitely not easy. It is interesting when you, like I was saying at the beginning, door knocking, when you actually talk to people about what's important to them. I haven't heard anybody talk about, the hot button political issues that I think get brought up a lot. It's the town council actually has no say in how abortion is done in town or things like that. And so it is a kind of nice. It's nice in a sense that the issues that people talk about that are important to them are not these like really far away. And I guess in California, we have the luxury that something like abortion is far away, but it's not at the top of people's mind. I would say if people are really, you'd ask them what are their political concerns in their neighborhood and in their community, and they do talk about these really local things. And so it is really a nice. It's nice to be able to talk about like kind of local things instead of the national things a lot of the time. But people do talk about these national issues, and I think that there is a what I try to tell people, and what I try to show people in who I am, is that I'm more concerned about someone's values at a especially at like a local elected office than I am about like their specific policy positions, because things change all the
Right.
time, right? Like nobody would have, I guess 4 years ago, I really would have wanted to elect a president or somebody who knew a lot about infectious disease and how to handle a pandemic and those sorts
Mm-hmm.
of things, but we had no idea, right? Like absolutely no idea. And so I think a lot of it is about trying to convey to people that, like, for me, this is my community that I grew up in, and I care about it deeply. And I care about the future of this community and the people that are going to come after me. And so I want to steward this place so it's beautiful for everyone. Um, and I think that resonates. There's also people that will ask me what my political party is, and depending, say f off. Sorry. And I'm like, that's cool. I mean, and it's there's a certain, you know, I can't, and I think I'm sure you've seen this in just having political conversations with people. I can't spend all my time just yelling at each other into the void. We're just not going to get anywhere. And so I think trying to find middle ground on those local issues is really good and helpful. But the things happening nationally are definitely concerning.
So it sounds like what you're saying is that if you separate it from the national to local level, like you are, your local Moscatos for what you're doing, it almost, I guess, indirectly takes away the red or blue side because they're looking at local. Here's what we need for the town,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, I guess your opinion ultimately is what comes down to is where has this happened? Where did this go wrong? Because I feel like it's absurd. Where I feel like I can listen to someone's opinion and say, I don't agree with that. I think
Yeah.
I could think that you were entirely wrong.
Yeah.
And maybe you're an idiot. I will
Yeah.
say that out loud
Yeah.
and be like, all right, cool.
Totally. And maybe they're a good guy. You
Yeah.
know, like yeah.
But it seems that the stigma, I don't think that's even the right word,
Mm.
but just the trend has been is like, like I said, to repeat myself, is that, if you're Democrat and you're Republican, I cannot talk to you. You're
Yep.
an idiot. You're
Yep.
a scumbag, and vice versa, right? Same side of the ball. So where do you, in your just opinion, humbled opinion, where do you think this went wrong? How did this come to be?
Yeah, so I think there's like a bazillion factors, right? I think there's like a literally it probably unquantifiable amount of things that that went wrong. One thing that I really think about a lot is the mass media, which is like a very, a kind of talking point that's used a lot. But to drill down into it, very tangibly, there are, maybe 40% of households in the United States that watch CNN, and 40% of households in the United States that watch Fox News.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I try to pay attention to both Fox News and CNN, and which is hard,
Yeah.
draining on my mental health.
And well, you get two different headlines a lot of times too.
So exactly my point, and it's exactly my point, is that if you're telling people two completely different things, and you are telling each side that the other side is a bad person and that they're, Satan were, like crazy things,
Mhm.
that Republicans want to kill everyone with guns, and Democrats want to trash the economy, everything, right?
Yeah.
Like things that are just simply not true.
Mhm.
I think that you get a really divided public because you are telling people different realities. Like truly, you're making people see the world differently. It's like if the Republicans had a red tint on and the Democrats had a blue tint, glasses, and somebody asked them what color is that, and so they'd say different things and yell about it because
Right.
it's so far away from the things that the other side believes now is so far away from their basic understanding of the way the world works, of politics. Uh, it really, like, you can't talk with those people
Mhm.
because it's so different.
Yeah.
And so I think that is a huge issue. I also don't think we're like really talking to each other as much as seemingly we used to. Like I remember growing up, a lot of block parties and neighbors knowing neighbors and those sorts of things.
Totally agree.
And I think the more you lose that community, the more it's easy to see somebody online and just say, who might be your neighbor, and say, I have nothing in common with that person. Like that person sees the world so differently than me. Screw them. And that's so, I just think that's tragic. I think that like in like again like just because I'm this local kind of guy, I think drilling down into neighborhoods, there are so many Republicans and Democrats and independents and libertarians mixed into a neighborhood, and somehow for the last 200 years we've gotten along. You know,
Yeah.
we can be on the board of the Cabana Club together and go to school together and be on sports teams, and we all root for the Lee High School football team. We're not
Right.
concerned about who we're rooting for president.
Right.
And so I think we have really like gotten isolated in just our own worlds, and I think I don't know, it's really sad to watch.
You use the word isolated, and I think, I totally agree with everything that you've said there, darn near, because I think part of it, the mass media for sure, I think right off the bat, yes, it's almost become people, I feel blind. Sometimes when I watch, straight up Fox News or CNN, sometimes I feel like I'm watching a reality TV show. I'm like, are you joking me,
Absolutely, yeah.
guys? It's silly,
It-
right? But then the other half of it being, I think, this pandemic has played a massive part. You're talking about isolation, right? And that word, it's almost like a trigger word to an
Yeah,
extent,
totally.
right? And it separated us, right? And I think that played a huge part into what it did for us in our society, for better or for worse, And then that's where even more so that red or blue thing, because both those two colors had a resignation and a part in what their belief was of what we should have done or didn't do or could have done, right? So it's interesting to see that, though. And I like that you take the local angle on it, that you focus on what's important in the community rather than, what's your political belief, right? Because you're not going to please everyone,
No.
as you said.
And I couldn't, like, I don't think if I went over to, West Virginia or wherever, or Florida or whoever, I don't know, or New York, I don't think that I could get elected there, right? Because I don't understand that community. And so I think part of it is we can only focus on and affect what we can focus on and affect. And so, yeah, I think that's why it's just important to at least be involved in your community. Yeah.
Very much so. I agree a lot. I want to talk a little bit about the foundations you're a part of. You mentioned it at the start of this episode here, and I want to focus on it a little bit more. Tell me a few. The first, I think actually right off the bat, I'll just start with it because obviously, well, you'll see why. Is that the Kyle J. Taylor Foundation? You called to it. We just had the golf tournament not too long ago. It was my first year going. I'm so glad I went. It was a blast.
How'd you play?
Not the greatest, but it was a lot of fun.
Good.
Nonetheless, I said, all right, I'll be there next year to improve upon it. Right.
Nice.
But anyways, I want to talk about your involvement in Kyle J. Taylor and other foundations you like to call to.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. So, I am on the board of the Kyle J. Taylor Foundation with Jennifer Sarmento, who, for anyone that doesn't know, the Kyle J. Taylor Foundation was founded by Jen, who was our good friend, Kyle Taylor's mom. Kyle passed away when he was 18 from sudden cardiac arrest, and his mom and dad and the people around him have decided to really take a very, very tragic thing and try to make something really good of it. And so the goal of the Kyle J. Taylor Foundation is to prevent sudden cardiac arrest in youth and educate the community about the risks and how we can all take better care of our loved ones and to fight this very scary disease. It's something that a lot of people don't know about. It's the number one cause of death on school campuses. It's the number one cause of death among student athletes. It's really, not as rare as I think people think. There have been in the last, I don't know how, in the last maybe 5 or 10 years, there have been, multiple students that have died from it at Lee High School, which is just absurd. And so it's been really great being a part of the foundation. A big part of what we do is heart screenings, and so we get out into schools like Lee, and then we've done, I think, most of the schools in the Campbell Union High School District, and then other schools, Andrew Hill, Santa Teresa, and just basically screening kids to see if they are at risk for this disease. And we found dozens now who are at risk, and what they do is then they go to their doctor and start that conversation, and it's just a conversation that a lot of doctors don't know to have with young adults, and don't realize the risks of it. And there's some places like Kaiser actually won't screen you unless you are exhibiting some like symptoms or things. And so
why wouldn't they do screenings?
We've talked a lot about it. I think that it probably just costs money, right? Like, I think that it's a thing they have to build out. And so So what we do is we say, okay, if the doctor and not the doctors, but if these large medical corporations aren't going to be proactive in this kind of preventative healthcare, we're going to. And so it's really great. And so we actually, Jen and I and the whole foundation just worked with the Campbell Union High School board, and the CUHSD, as of a few weeks ago, is the first uh, district in the state of California to implement heart screenings for all student athletes, which is just huge.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah,
When they announced that she was Jen was
mhm,
on the news, that's where I
yep,
watched it, the local news. But it's so huge that happened, because I mean, it's like it's as right. If I understand correctly, it works the same as, if you want to play a sport in high school, you have to get your physical, right? You gotta say, oh, you're healthy to play. It ties into your physical, right? That
yep.
you have to have a heart screen. That's monstrous. That's at just the local school district level, right? You said CUHSD, but from what I heard, at least at the golf tournament, she made a mention that other districts have already reached out to her trying to get this implemented, right?
Right. The superintendent from the Los Gatos Union High School District just reached. I got an email from him a couple days ago. And now Morgan Hill's interested, and so it's really really exciting that we could be changing the lives of young adults all over the Bay Area. It's
Yeah.
super super cool.
To understand the disease a little bit more, because I'm a little naive to the full extent of it. It's a hidden problem, right? If you have it, you don't know it's an issue until it becomes an issue, right?
Potentially, yeah. So there's it manifests in different forms. So there's sudden cardiac arrest is kind of an umbrella term for a number of different like specific diseases. So there's like Wolff Parkinson's White syndrome, and that I have learned the science of and couldn't regurgitate right now. But there's a bunch of different things. So some of them it's like a very small hole in your heart. Sometimes it's just an arrhythmia where your heart isn't beating in the right way. But it's all of these things that can cause your heart to stop. Um, Again, really like a lot of the time really seemingly benign things, but in especially in athletes who are using their hearts, they're beating their hearts a lot stronger and heavier. It can be a real concern. And so, but yeah, basically that it is this underlying health condition, but it can be detected through heart screenings and ECGs. And so that's what we do. So we just pretty much all of us in the foundation can do this now. Is you put electrodes on someone's body, and the test takes like 10 seconds, and it just measures the heart rate. And so it takes 10 heartbeats and says, here's exactly what we just saw. It's a snapshot in time. So in a year that person's heart could be different, and maybe they need to come back and get screened again. But for that moment, that's what their heart looks like. And we have doctors that interpret those ECGs and look at them and say, hey, this is totally normal, right? And that's what 99% of them are. Totally normal, healthy young kid, good to go. But then occasionally there will be students that have, maybe there's it's just like a graph that is just kind of going up and down, and there's a big spike somewhere, right?
Mhm.
Or a lack of a spike somewhere.
Just
And
irregularity.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so that doctor says, hey, they can make a referral and say, hey, I really think you need to look further into this. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe we just need to get you a more serious test so people can go get more tests. They can get ultrasounds and get kind of elevated ECGs to actually understand what exactly is going on in their body. Max Broberg, actually, because of the foundation, he didn't get his heart screened, but he after Kyle passed, a lot of us decided to go to the doctor and just say, hey, like I had this friend, this happened. What am I okay? And Max was having a shortness of breath. I don't know if he had fainted or not. Fainting is like one of the number one signs that you might be at risk for sudden cardiac arrest. And he went into the doctor and they said, oh yeah, you actually have I think it's like a penny-sized hole in his
Oh my
heart.
gosh.
And they were able. So there was this, that's very serious.
Yeah.
And they were able to operate on him and repair it, and he's totally fine.
So
Yeah,
that actually, that's incredible. First
Yeah.
of all, sorry, I don't want to take away from that. That's uh, awesome that they found that and were able to take care of it. But insane to even think about that. I was gonna ask, talking about they had a surgery. So what if and when they find something? Does that just go into then a surgery? Is that how they take care of it when they find irregularity in
Hmm.
the heart?
Yeah, good question. So it depends on exactly what form of the disease you have. So there, a lot of the time, doctors are able to operate, especially with holes and those sorts of things. You can seal those, and you know, and then you're pretty much good, and just keep an eye on it. There's also medications that people can take. So like sometimes people are recommended to get if your heart is having a hard time pumping blood, maybe your cholesterol is a little high, because that's another cool thing we do, just kind of on the side, is there are students who don't have necessarily heart issues, but their cholesterol is higher, their blood pressure is high, and we take all those vitals as well, and encourage people to talk with their doctors about
Hmm.
any of those sorts of things. So that's
Yeah.
another kind of just positive thing that comes out of all of it. But you can take like baby aspirin, right? It's as simple as that, and it just thins the blood a little bit, and keeps it moving a little better. A lot of older adults who have high cholesterol will take baby aspirin, and then there's more serious drugs people can get prescribed. But yeah, that's it. I think kind of the three options are medication, surgery, and then there's also things that can't be operated on and don't need medicine. That are just folks that are maybe at a higher risk. They don't have maybe a specific disease that has at least been identified yet. And so, but having that awareness is super helpful. So there are families that will buy an AED that they'll take with them when they go on vacation,
Mm.
just in case something happens. And so just like that hyper awareness. Kyle, when he passed away, he had just gone to the bathroom, and 30 minutes later, a couple of our other friends said, "Hey, Kyle has been gone for a really long time. Like, I hope everything's okay." And they knocked on the door, didn't hear anything. And maybe if Kyle had been gone for 5 or 10 minutes, and they thought about, okay, Kyle has this, he's at risk for this disease. We should make sure that he's okay. And so it's just those sorts of things, that really raising the awareness and recognizing that it's something that can happen. Because I think, like, a lot of the time, as young people, we feel invincible, and we're not.
Mm-hmm. It's insane to me to think that this is something that I feel like isn't often talked about. You hear about your health and what to do, and it's exercise, eat well, get your normal checkups. But like, as far as your heart health, I mean, that's what keeps you going in the human body, right? And I feel like this, it's not often talked about. Like, hey, you could be the healthiest guy in the world, but if you have this just irregularity, this small issue with your heart that you don't realize, you mentioned penny size or even pinhole size on your heart, you wouldn't know until you get it checked out or it becomes a problem, which you don't want to get to that point. And it's insane to me that I feel like it's not often talked about when it comes to our everyday health of seeing the doctor. And it's awesome of what you do, and you and Jen and everyone a part of the team there. I mean, I love every ounce of it beyond, what Kyle meant to, Jen, but of course, say the least, and then everyone that surrounded him. And it's awesome seeing the foundation you guys have created and awesome support
Yeah,
everyone
it's
has
super.
had.
I'm so proud of everybody, and Jen and the whole team. Yeah, it's really cool.
Most definitely. I want to ask about one more foundation. You mentioned, I think at the start, I think I heard the Hill. Did I hear that right? Was it, you said you're a couple foundations, couple nonprofits.
Right. Yeah.
Did I
Yeah.
hear that right, or was it a different
Oh,
name?
I'm sorry. Oh, I did say the Hill. So the Hill. That's, I should stop saying that. DC. So the Hill is Capitol Hill. In DC, and so I worked for our member of Congress, Anna Eshoo, for a little bit, and so that was really cool. But the United Nations Foundation was somewhere where I worked, and I actually now work at another local nonprofit called the San Jose Conservation Corps.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's your role in all those? Some of those. One of
Yeah,
them.
yeah. So the United Nations Foundation I worked at a while ago. I was a grassroots recruitment specialist. And so that was a public health nonprofit that supports the work of the United Nations or the United Nations. And we were working on vaccine advocacy actually right before the start of the pandemic. Very interesting. And then
Wow.
I was with them when the pandemic started. So there was a very, very interesting experience, just kind of understanding how to get vaccines in arms, and so they're a really great foundation, and I didn't end up sticking with them. Then I worked for a member of Congress for a while in DC, and that was a really great experience. Not something that I would do again right now, but it's it's a challenging environment, and I think there's a lot of I think if you don't agree with most every decision that your member is making, it's really challenging to keep writing things and things for them when it's like, okay, well, this is actually counter to what like my values, and so that's hard.
Hmm.
But so now I work for a nonprofit called the San Jose Conservation Corps, and I'm their special projects manager, which means a lot of different things. And so our organization is a youth workforce development program, and so we employ people that are 17 to 27, and we provide them with high-paying jobs in a variety of different fields. And so they work building trails, they work fighting food insecurity, and so distributing meals. We used to run a homeless shelter that I used to manage, and so we had 30 core members or so that were running this homeless shelter and getting that experience and getting that understanding of what it's like to be without a home. And we also prevent wildfires. We do wildfire mitigation and e-waste, recycling, a ton of
Yeah.
different areas. And it's this really cool program where we employ folks who otherwise might not be employed, and have been facing a variety of barriers in their lives for whatever reason. 30% of our folks are housing insecure. We have former foster youth, those sorts of things, and we basically give them opportunities, and it's super super cool. Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah,
I'm sitting here just thinking right now. You're talking about all these things that you do. I mean, we've been sitting here for just shy of an hour now, hearing your story, Rob. And how do you have time to sleep? I mean, yeah, dude. It's out of respect. It's incredible. I'm in awe. That's really what it is, you know. So, because what do you do for work? You said you work about 40.
So that's my job.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's my professional job. Yeah,
And then you still somehow find time to spend time with your girlfriend, work, and then go knock on doors to spread your campaign. How do you do it?
Yeah, it's not easy. There's definitely it is this last like 6 months or so has been it's been challenging, especially come back home, keeping up friendships and making, being a human person, trying to do all
Yeah.
the things that I want to do. But it really does help that I really like the work I do, and I actually like I think if you don't like knocking on doors, you probably shouldn't run for office. But I really enjoy it.
Mhm.
I think it's like the most fun thing, just to be able to go talk to people and understand your community. And so I'll knock doors till 7 or 8 p.m. and then go eat dinner and maybe watch an episode of Netflix or something. But it's fulfilling, and so I don't know, I wouldn't do it any other way. And it's also to do the things that I want to do with my life. This is kind of what I got to do. And so I really enjoy most of it, and I have to work to pay the bills. So
Right.
I always I one thing I'll say is I think a lot of people don't think that nonprofits pay very well, and so I think people stay away from that field a lot of the time because they just think it's more of like a volunteer thing or whatever. And I actually very much support myself. I make a very a salary I'm very proud of, working at a nonprofit, and so it's actually a really cool way to support myself and support like this work that I'm trying to do in the community.
Yeah. Good for
Yeah.
you. What do you? I mean, how do you go about? I mean, time management, I guess, is really what I'm getting at. You know, because you said balancing all this stuff and you want to do it at the best level possible.
Yeah.
I mean, are you one of those people? Are you writing out a planner? Or are you just taking one task at a time when the day comes around?
Yeah.
What do you do with that?
Good question. I do not have a planner. I probably should have a planner. I mean, I use my calendar in it, and so
Yeah.
I try to put a lot of stuff in my calendar. I try to cut out time for like, so when I'm gonna go knock doors, I put door knocking on my calendar. So then not only do people looking at my calendar know that I'm not gonna be around at that time, but I also keep myself accountable because sometimes it's the easiest thing in the world to not do the things that you need to do
Right.
to achieve these kind of long-term goals. But I'm just kind of a, one foot in front of the other, and if it's the I like to think that whenever like a task gets presented to me or whatever, I just do it. And so just try to just do things when they come and prioritize that way. And if it's important, I'll get to it. And if it's not, maybe I won't. But it is hard.
Yeah.
It's also, I definitely spend a lot more time doing campaign work and nonprofit things included, a lot more time than 40 hours in a week.
Yeah.
working on these things.
I bet.
But I still have been getting time to spend time with friends, and so it's all good.
Well, good. Good
Yeah,
for
yeah.
you. I have one last question I'm thinking about because it's very evidently clear if our viewers and listeners haven't figured it out. I can tell them is that you're a very motivated dude. I mean, you got the energy like no other. I mean, I can't believe hearing everything that you do, and you're sitting here and so fired up about it, and I love it. It fires me up listening to it. So with that, is there someone, something, a quote, person, role model, whatever it is that fires you up and motivates you that you look to when you're feeling, low on the gas? Is there someone or something or a saying that you look to?
Yeah, that's a good question. So one of my favorite quotes in the world is the quote from the book 1984 by George Orwell. And that quote says, "Sanity is not statistical." And it's kind of like a silly, convoluted sort of thing, and it's hard to understand. I wish it was easier to understand. But basically what that says is, to me, your sanity, so like what makes sense in the world, is not based on any statistics. So if if you're alone in thinking something, that doesn't mean you're crazy. It might mean that you're crazy, right? And so I really like to think about that quote, especially when I'm just chugging along and people are like, "Hey, dude, you're like way too young to be doing this. Like, I'm just not going to vote for you. You're too young." And like that hurts to hear, but also it's motivating because I know that person doesn't hold all the beliefs of the people that live in the town I'm trying to get elected in. And it's just motivating to work harder. And so I like to think in that sort of mindset of just really believing in what I'm doing. And I think it very much keeps me accountable to doing everything for the right reasons and being really sincere and authentic and kind in everything I'm trying to do, just because I can always back that up. I can say I'm doing this because I truly believe in it. There's a woman named Mariko who is former mayor of Los Gatos, and she is someone I very much look up to. I text her on a weekly basis, and she actually she had a very, very, part of the reason I look up to her so much is because in this last year, folks may have seen this on the news a little bit, she got attacked, like not physically, but people came to the town council meeting, outed her son as gay, and came after her as like this Chinese communist, and all of these just like really, really like really hurtful things. And she stood so strong and just said, "I know this is not the majority of my community that is thinking and saying these things, and so I'm just going to keep working on behalf of the people." And so that kind of, I mentioned this earlier, but just another thing I kind of harken back to is just doing the work, because there's a ton of people that are not going to do the work, and that's all good. Like, I'm not, nothing against them, but I want to do the work to get the things done that I know are important. And yeah, so there's a lot of people I look up to, a lot of like young leaders and folks that I think are really making a difference. So yeah.
Well, to those naysayers, you mentioned the people that say you're too young, this or that, or like you mentioned, oh, what's your political party, F off, whatever it is. The naysayers is that there's no doubt, Rob, with how motivated, locked in, open-minded, and grounded and level-headed. I mean, I could think of a lot of describing words from knowing you over the years, and that's biased, no doubt, but proudly so, and then hearing you tell your story that I haven't heard, firsthand. I loved every bit of it, I'm so excited to see what you do, where you go with it and everything. So
thank you, man.
It was
same
a
to
pleasure.
you.
Absolutely, yeah. So it was a pleasure, Rob.
Absolute pleasure.
If anyone want to find you on social media, your journey, where to vote for you, spread the campaign, whatever it is, where do they go?
Yeah, good question. So best question.
Yeah, right. The important one.
So my email is rob@robforlosgatos.com.
Okay.
So anybody can email me there. My phone number, I put it on my business cards. It's 408-637-1423. Anybody can text or call me if they have ideas or thoughts about how they want to get involved or things that they think are important in the community. My website is robforlosgatos.com. And so that has information about me, about how to get involved. It has my phone number, address, and email on there. So yeah, robforlosgatos.com. If people want to learn anything or donate or get involved or anything like that. Yeah.
And you have an Instagram too, right? Isn't it
Rob
for Los
yeah.
Gatos?
So I think it's probably Rob for Los Gatos. I also have a Facebook that I think is Rob for Los Gatos. So
There's a trend there. I think we've figured out from there.
yeah.
Nonetheless, I'll make sure we'll link it all for the people who
Perfect,
are
thank
listening or watching. It'll be linked in the description, stuff like that. You guys will be able to find it. So, Rob, as we wrap things up here, do you have any exiting pieces, statements, concerns, anything?
No, I guess the one thing I would say is we were talking a little bit about like the media and all of that. Keep doing this. This is like, I think the most important form of journalism and way to actually understand where people are at. Just talking with normal people, I think is not, again, we're talking about this, not being done enough. And so I think this is like a super, super important medium that you're doing here. So thank you for doing this.
Rob, I appreciate the kind words, man. You're always so kind. I really appreciate that. I enjoy doing this. So, we'll keep on rolling that way. All right, folks. Well, as we wrap things up, thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate each and every one of you. If you're on YouTube, make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. I ask you one thing only. Be a friend, tell a friend. That's how we grow the show here, right? And if you're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or listening anywhere else right now, send this on over to a friend, right? If you enjoyed it, chances are they're going to like it too. So, guys, like I mentioned in the description below, go check out Robbie at all those links. They'll be there. It'll be right in front of your face. Go support him. If you support me, you'll support him. So, with that being said, folks, thank you so much. Appreciate you guys watching. I'll see you on the next one.